Welcome to MSUA Game Changers webcast, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends and share what you need to know about the future of mobile satellite communications. I'm your host, Roger Lanto, and I'm excited to introduce Mike Dano, lead industry analyst at Ookla. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Roger. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Ookla is regularly releasing regional reports on broadband connectivity, but more recently, Mike has been very closely monitoring and reporting on spectrum auctions here in the US, which has special meaning in the context of emerging D2D opportunities. I think this would be a great opportunity to take a deep dive into the results of these auctions and the implications for the connectivity industry generally, with particular emphasis on Ookla's unique insight and perspective. Now, before we get into that, Mike, tell me about your professional journey and where and when satellite technology became a part of your life.
Sure. No, and again, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I was looking across all the ones that you've been doing of this series, and I'm joining a really exciting and varied group of speakers on this series. So I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, it's nice to be here.
I'm glad you didn't call it a rogues gallery. Thank you.
I missed my opportunity. I'm glad you got to it. Certainly joining the rogues gallery here. So my background is I come from journalism. I went to print journalism school in college. Yep. Yeah, there's a couple of us out there. I tried to get into the broadcast journalism course, but they wouldn't have me with the way I look, and I couldn't get into radio with this nasally voice I've got. So print was the only option left.
I understand you're a recovering CNBC star.
Oh, well, yeah, my one time on CNBC. That's right. Probably 15 years ago. That still counts.
Okay.
But I spent a long time in journalism, mainly covering the telecommunications industry. So I started at RCR Wireless News and moved over to what is now Fierce Network, and then spent the last 8 or so years at Light Reading, all covering telecom with a focus on mobility. So that's really been my background up until about a year ago when I moved into this position here at Ookla. And here at Ookla, I am one of the members of the Analyst team. And so for those who are not familiar with Ookla, it's the company behind the Speed Test app. And so we've got Speed Test, but Ookla also has other business lines, including Ekahau, which is Wi-Fi network installation and management. It has Down Detector, which tracks whether your service is up or down. And then it also has Route Metrics, which is a nationwide, actually international drive testing professional services outfit. And so as a member of the Ookla analyst team, I'm able to look at all the data that is collected by all of those services and sort of swim around in that data lake in order to see what is interesting.
Judging from the website, you're having way too much fun, as far as I can tell. But
it's a little busy.
But as a result of joining Ookla and getting involved in these measurements and metrics, this introduced you to the satellite industry thanks to the emergence of D2D, correct?
That's right. So during my tenure at Light Reading, I had been covering satellites a little bit, as that industry has slowly but surely been colliding with the cellular industry. But certainly here in my role at Ookla, I've been looking at that with an absolute laser focus because there is much to learn and ascertain both on the fixed side of satellites as well as the mobile side.
Boy, there's so many things we could talk about, but I just wanted to clarify one thing. Since you come out of the cellular space, can you comment quickly about the difference between this sort of standards-based world and this bespoke world and what this collision is bringing about?
Bespoke meaning satellites?
Yes, proprietary systems, etc.
Sure. No, the cellular industry, is very standardized. And it basically has to be. As you travel around your city or your state or your country or the world, the only way that those connections work is if your handset is standardized with the receiver or the cell site. So those two things have to do a handshake, and the only way that's possible is through standards. And so following the 3GPP That's the official standards organization of the cellular industry. That's where 3G, 4G, 5G, that's where that comes out of, is the 3GPP. And so, yes, the cellular industry is very standardized, but there's lots of options for players to pick and choose the technologies that they want to deploy. But the only way that it works, if you roam around the world, is if it's standardized. And so, yes, much different than satellites. And I have to say, as I've been trying to educate myself on the satellite industry, it is Olympic level complexity compared to the cellular industry. So I
Thank you.
can kind of
Okay.
I can kind of understand spectrum usage standards in cellular, but man, when you get into satellites, it's just next level. It's international complexity, it's technological complexity, it's regulatory complexity on a scale that is practically mind-blowing. So I still consider myself very much in a learning mode for satellites.
Well, that's a perfect setup for you to help us understand what exactly is D2D. Everybody talks about it. And how, in your words, is it different from NTN? Because I think there are some differences.
Okay. I'm interested to hear what your differences are. I think I agree that there's lots of ways to view this technology. There's a number of different implementations, and where it goes in the future is anyone's guess at this point. But here's what I'll say about that is that I agree that there's lots of terms and terminology to use. I've luckily been able to test several of these services myself in various scenarios. And here's where I get a bit of a humble brag in. This summer, I was lucky enough to go with some friends up to the top of Mount Rainier and have done a number of the mountains here in Colorado as well. And so in those situations, I've been able to make use of some of these technologies. And it's wonderful. It's really just a much safer situation for everybody. If I'm able to text my wife and say, weather is rolled in, but we're fine. That is such a relief to be able to do that. And many times I'm almost in reach of a cellular network, but it doesn't quite work. Or I'm down in a valley and there's just no way that I can get any cellular signal. So I absolutely have to use, whether it's Globalstar or whether it's Starlink. I've been able to test those services and really see how they work in the real world and in situations where it matters if they work or not.
Well, okay, so that's the positive side, but you also have turned somewhat of a jaundiced eye to D2D in terms of how much usage there actually is, and maybe it doesn't work everywhere, right?
It's true. There are a number of caveats to today's D2D sector. And so you're right. Here at Ookla, we were able to take a global look at several different D2D providers, including Starlink and Skylo and Link Global, which have services in different countries around the world. We were able to collectively look at the Android smartphones that are connecting to those services in various commercial countries around the world, including the US. And the findings were very interesting. So to be clear, what we looked at was essentially when the phone registers as having been connected to one of these services based on the PLMN number, which is essentially a roaming number. It's every carrier, whether it's domestic or international, has its own specific ITU number. It's basically, this is my network. Here's the number that I use for my network to identify it. And so these D2D companies each have their own one. And so we were able to see those. And so essentially what we did was looked to see of the total number of users that we could see, how many of those users connected to one of these D2D providers at least once per month as a unique user. Right. So total number of users that we can see, and then unique users that made at least one connection per month. And in the US, that number was 0.5% per month. We're making these kinds of connections according to the recordings on their phone that we were able to see. And we enacted a lot of this. Actually took quite a bit of data science, and I had a lot of support from a lot of the really smart engineers who work at Ookla in order to filter out the data findings that were not accurate. So we spent a long time making sure that the data set that we were working from was in fact as bad as accurate as we could get. We're pretty comfortable with the numbers that we have, but yeah, it's much less than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a little bit of a higher number, but that's the percentage that we saw. And here's one final thing I'll mention is that it's still early days, and also we got about 6 months worth of samples, mostly in the winter in North America. So to be fair, it's cold outside. No one wants to go outside when it's cold. So as the summer ends, we're going to have another look at this toward the end of this summer and certainly into next year. So that's preliminary findings. They may evolve and change as the service gets more widely deployed and people go outside when it's warm.
So, of course, back to the question at hand: spectrum auctions that just recently took place, and I think some of them were MSS, but not all of them. But how frequently do these auctions take place, and what was special this time?
Sure, and you're referring to the recent auction 113 AWS3 for cellular, right? From the FCC, the one that just concluded about a week ago.
Whatever it was, it generated about $3+ billion.
Yeah, yep, that's it. Okay, just to make sure. Yeah, because so yes, the FCC does. In the U.S., the FCC does host occasional spectrum auctions when that spectrum does become available. And so, it kind of ebbs and flows. There's been a number of probably, I would say, 20 major spectrum auctions over the past 2 decades. Maybe more or less, kind of depends. Some of them are certainly much bigger than others. And at the start of the 5G era, sort of circa 2021, 2022, the FCC hosted 2 major spectrum auctions. The C-band auction raised $100 billion in winning bids. And then the next one, I want to say it was like 20 billion. Anyway, but this one that just concluded about a week ago was the FCC has been pretty quiet. There has not been any major auction or any major spectrum to auction over the past few years until this most recent auction, which concluded about a week ago. In the FCC parlance, that's auction number 113. It's and again, we're going to get into all the cellular jargon that you could possibly want. I could go on and talk about it, but it goes by a couple of names, so it helps to say. So it's the FCC's auction 113. The auction released spectrum licenses in the AWS3 spectrum band, which is very widely deployed. And essentially, these are spectrum licenses that were originally auctioned in 2014. However, the company that bought all of these licenses defaulted on the payment and was not allowed to keep the licenses. And so the FCC took the licenses back, and after much court action...
We can name names here, Mike.
Yeah, it's Dish and EchoStar were the companies that didn't. They essentially what happened was that Dish EchoStar received a small business bidding credit that the FCC later said that they should not have had and should not have used. And after much court battling, after more than a decade of court fighting between the FCC and EchoStar returned the licenses to the FCC, and that is why the FCC hosted this auction, is because it received those licenses back from EchoStar and was able to re-auction them again under a new auction. And so that's what happened.
And then, so what were the most significant developments from this latest auction?
If you want to really nerd out, there's nothing more fun than a spectrum auction, because
bring it on.
The reason it's just so interesting. What it is it's a publicly hosted auction, and so you get some details, but you don't get all the details. The FCC releases the amounts that have been bid during the auction, but it does not release the identities of the bidders until the auction is over. And so all the companies that are participating in the auction during the auction do not know who they're bidding against. So there's a lot of mystery and sort of drama that goes on during these auctions. I just think it's a fascinating process, and so watching it from the outside in has been really a very interesting process. But anyway, the auction concluded after probably a week and a half of bidding. It raised a total of about $3.5 billion in total bids. Verizon, after the auction ended, the FCC released the identities of the bidders, and it turns out that Verizon walked away with the lion's share or spent the most in the auction. So there's a difference between spending a lot of money and getting a lot of licenses, because some licenses, like the ones that cover Boston or Chicago, are very valuable. So you actually spend a lot of money on those specific licenses, whereas other licenses that cover, smaller towns or, cow country, they do not go for very much money. So Verizon spent by far the most money and received the licenses that were considered the most valuable.
First time with SpaceX participating?
And so that was the very interesting part of this auction. As far as I know, this is the first time that SpaceX has participated in a spectrum auction intended for terrestrial cellular operations. And so,
was there another surprise participant?
Well, we knew that they were going to participate. So they were listed among the companies that had registered to participate in the auction. So we knew that they had an opportunity to bid, but we did not know if.
But you were tongue-in-cheek posting on LinkedIn a unicorn and a
RoboCop.
A Robocop.
Yeah.
What were those supposed to be representing?
I just think it's funny to make AI do pictures of RoboCop and a unicorn doing things together. I just think it's hysterical. So anyway, that picture was just a fake AI created picture of RoboCop and a unicorn participating in the auction. But the purpose of that post was to say that we didn't know who the bidders were until the end of the auction. When the auction ended, we did find out that actually SpaceX did bid in the auction. Not only were they registered to participate, they actually did bid.
Was Amazon in there?
Amazon was not one of the registered companies to bid.
Interesting. But so SpaceX was the only unusual company?
Yes, as far as I know. So a total of 17 entities registered to participate. Some of those companies we know the ownership, and some we do not know the ownership. We do not know who they are. But they're usually just sort of, some guy who thinks it's a good idea to buy a license and then sell it later for more money.
And why do these auctions matter? I mean, how does this manifest post auction?
Yeah, no. So in the case of Verizon, it matters a great deal, because as Verizon deploys more spectrum into its network, into its cellular 5G network, the performance of that network will get better. You can directly, it is a one-to-one correlation between more spectrum, better network. That is 100%.
And how is broadband performance evolving in the wireless world? What is the data telling you? Because you're watching this all over the world, all over the country.
We do. We watch it very closely all over the world, all over the country. And yeah, I mean, you can just see. So the introduction of additional spectrum coupled with a more efficient technology with 5G, you can see the performance of cellular networks globally have been really increasing dramatically. So I think the last time I checked, and don't hold me to this, but I think the last time I checked, the median download speed in the US across all 5G networks is nearing 300 megabytes a second, which is incredible to those of us who, bought their first cell phones as a Nokia brick and marveled at WAP interfaces that allowed us to read a CNN news story on our phone. So the fact that you can get 300 megabytes per second on a cellular connection these days is really quite astounding. It's faster than my current home internet.
And we're talking now about getting satellite connectivity to cars. We've obviously got it on handsets, and it's also on your typical flight across the country or around the world. So what's your view on the in-flight connectivity picture? Do you have an Ookla perspective on that?
Actually, I do. My colleague on the analyst team, Carrie Baker, recently put out a report looking at in-flight Wi-Fi. And his findings are very impressive because many of the airlines have been installing Starlink. And you can see it very clearly in the data. Those Starlink connections are surprisingly fast. So the in-flight Wi-Fi industry is really is going through a real renaissance where, it used to kind of work sometimes maybe if you sat in your seat correctly and ordered the right drink, and now you can get work done and watch streaming shows, and it's just sort of a general just a really usable internet connection now, thanks to this new technology.
I am kind of curious, by the way, since I too am a recovering journalist, but I also have another monkey on my back, which is I come out of the automotive industry. So is Ookla ever going to have a solution for measuring connectivity in cars?
Oh, great question. Well, Roger, I knew I liked you, and now I see why. You're one of the recovering journalists such as myself. So I,
Yes.
I knew I liked you. I could tell. But yes, in fact, Ookla does have products that are available for the connected car industry. That is one of the focuses of the data set that we have, and certainly it is actually something that we are looking at within the analyst team. Is what kind of connectivity makes sense for connected cars, for drones, for AI connected robots. Yeah, it's not just a story about what megabytes per second your cell phone gets. We've done that, been there. We understand that well, and we're certainly looking to a really interesting horizon.
Okay, I see we have a conversation opportunity for another day. And late breaking coming into this call, you told me there's some C-band activity. So was there an announcement today? What's going to happen with C-band?
Yes, and again, if you're like me and want to nerd out about spectrum auctions, boy, we got some great news today. So, like I mentioned, the FCC holds occasional spectrum auctions. Some of them are very big, and some of them are smaller. But the one that they just announced today, about an hour ago, is that they are going to hold an auction of the upper C-band. So they did hold an auction of the lower C-band, and it was 200 megahertz nationwide, and that was the auction that generated $100 billion, the biggest spectrum auction ever in U.S. history. Now, the FCC has just announced that they're going to auction the upper C-band, which is almost as much as about 160 megahertz nationwide. So not quite as much, not 200, but pretty close. That auction will be held next summer, and then the spectrum licenses will be available sometime shortly thereafter. So what that means essentially is that the speedy 5G connections that you get today are nothing compared to what we will soon get as this spectrum is released into the marketplace and as 6G standards get released into the cellular industry.
Oh no, you had to bring up 6G.
Oh yeah, that's happening. It's real. I thought it wasn't real for a long time, but I'm convinced it's gonna happen. Look to the 2028 Olympics.
At the risk of re-traumatizing any viewers of this video, we're also looking, of course, at the sunsetting of 4G, but we won't talk about that here and now.
Okay, I'm interested to hear about that. I'm looking actually for your scoops on that, so I'm staying tuned for the next exciting installment.
I'm working on it. So, where can I find out more about Ookla?
Sure. So if you're interested in the reports that I write or any of my colleagues write, you can go to ookla.com and click on the research button, or just Google Ookla Research, Ookla, Ookla Research.
Yeah, there's a lot of content there. All right. Well, okay, let me take us out here. I want to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. You can learn more about the MSUA at msua.org, of course. You can learn how to get our weekly newsletter that gives you updates on everything that's happening in the industry and shares information about upcoming events. And you can also find out how to become a member. We look forward to seeing you next time on MSUA's Game Changers webcast. Mike, thank you very much.